Chapter 6. Verse 1. God traveled to the provinces where the governors of heaven dwelling on earth were appointed, and as Jehovah had commissioned him in Horeb, so he installed the governors on their thrones. Verse 2. The governors were situated at remote distances within Waga, Pan, and God sent messengers to notify them of his arrival. Verse 3. The Lord, upon learning of God's journey, established a protectorate in his kingdom in the city of Ulu on earth. He then joined God's ship and traveled with him throughout Waga, attending the inauguration of the governors in their heavenly places. Verse 4. To the governors God said, "What I give you pertains to the matters of heaven. The Lord handles earthly things and angels who work with mortals. Your task is to care for the Esyans, provide them with shelter, food, clothing, and education during their helplessness." Verse 5. God added, "Remember, the time will come when these governorships will become independent kingdoms, and you shall be raised as sub-gods." Verse 6. After the inauguration, the Lord persuaded God to visit Ulu, his place on earth, and see the mortals with whom he worked. God agreed, and the Lord sent messengers ahead to ensure the house of the Lord was cleansed and prepared. Verse 7. The protectorate notified the Ashars, who impressed mortals to cleanse and purify the house of the Lord, burning incense of sweet myrrh and hepatane without even realizing they were fulfilling the Lord's command. Verse 8. When the ship of God's hosts arrived at Ulu, mortals saw it in the sky, and in fear they consulted the prophet of the Lord, who declared, "Behold, God appears in a sea of fire in the firmament." Verse 9. God made the ship invisible to calm their fear, and he and his hosts descended into the house of the Lord, touching the things mortals had built, so they could perceive their presence. Verse 10. The Lord hosted a banquet, and God's angels spent 4 days exchanging fellowship with the Ashars who ministered to mortals. The Ashars took the angels around among mortals, showing them both their waking and sleeping states. Verse 11. Due to the presence of God's hosts, mortals were energized to worship with renewed vigor, spending their days in the house of worship without understanding the cause. Verse 12. On the 4th day, God commanded his hosts to prepare for departure. The ship was illuminated and set for its course. Verse 13. God prayed, "O Jehovah, who created all, bless thy Lord, who has toiled for 100 years with these mortals to lift them up. Though man denies the Lord and claims there is no God, still his hands and feet are guided every day. When he enters the unseen worlds, they become visible, and thy Lord provides and teaches him of thy heavenly kingdoms." Verse 14. God continued, "Man grows up out of the earth and says, there is no God and no Lord. Yet it is thy Lord who inspires the building of cities and guides mortals. But when man turns to strife and destruction, the Lord withdraws his angels, and the city falls into ruin. Yet man knows not the cause. O Jehovah Father, bless thy Lord and his hosts." Verse 15. The Lord prayed, "O Jehovah ever-present, hear the words of thy God. He comprehends the whole earth and heaven. Glorify him, for his love is the glory of all men, and his strength is fashioned after thy foundations." Verse 16. The Lord continued, "Give thy God swiftness and rest and joy in thy quickening." Verse 17. Meanwhile the mortals of Ulu had gathered to worship, singing and dancing to the Lord, and the angels joined in. God sat on the altar, illuminating it so the mortals could see him. The chief prophet approached, and the Lord placed his hand on the prophet's forehead, allowing him to speak in God's name. Verse 18. The prophet spoke, "Behold me, I am the God of heaven and earth, and my words come out of the mouth of this prophet. Keep holy the 4 days of the moon, for they are the Lord's days. Do no evil, strive for wisdom and good, and when you die you shall live. For I have prepared places for you in my heaven. Rejoice, for the Lord lives and reigns." Verse 19. When the prophet finished, God rose from the altar along with his traveling hosts, saluting the Lord in Jehovah's name before disappearing into the heavens above.